The television courtroom had never seen such a collision of arrogance and accountability. Karen Mitchell, a 45-year-old self-proclaimed social media influencer with perfectly highlighted hair and a designer outfit that screamed desperate relevance, sat in the defendant's chair with a smug superiority, born of years spent bullying service workers and demanding to speak to managers. Her manicured fingers scrolled through her phone even as the bailiff called the court to order, oblivious to the fact that she was about to face the most humiliating moment of her life. What began as a simple small claims dispute over an unpaid photography bill was about to erupt into the most viral courtroom moment in television history. Karen had no idea that her own husband's text messages were sitting in a folder on Judge Judy's bench, ready to destroy everything she had built her fake influencer life upon. Judge Judy Scheindlin sat behind the bench with the calm confidence of someone who had crushed entitled people for breakfast every day for 25 years. At 78, she possessed a razor-sharp legal mind and a zero-tolerance attitude that had made her a cultural icon and America's favorite dispenser of courtroom justice. She had reviewed this case file 3 times the night before, and her experienced eye had caught something that made her smile with anticipation. Karen Mitchell wasn't just another entitled defendant trying to skip out on paying for services. She was a fraud, a liar, and someone whose digital footprint told a story that would shock even the most jaded court observers. Judge Judy had been waiting for the perfect moment to teach America a lesson about respect, the dangers of fake influencer culture, and why you should never underestimate someone based on their age. Today was that day. The plaintiff, Jessica Romano, sat nervously clutching a folder full of contracts, emails, and printed Instagram posts. At 28, she had poured her heart and soul into building her photography business from nothing, working double shifts as a waitress while shooting weddings and events on weekends. A single mother to a 6-year-old daughter, the $3,200 Karen Mitchell owed her meant far more than just payment for services. It was rent money, grocery money, and the line between keeping her dream alive or losing everything she had worked for. Jessica had spent 12 exhausting hours at Karen's daughter's Sweet 16 party, capturing more than 500 beautifully edited photographs that Karen immediately posted across all her social media platforms, gushing about how perfect they were and tagging Jessica's business with heart emojis and praise. 3 days later, Karen sent a cold email refusing payment and claiming the photos were unprofessional garbage that had damaged her brand. Jessica had begged, pleaded, and tried to reason with her for 2 months before finally scraping together enough money to file this lawsuit. She had no idea she was about to be vindicated in the most spectacular way imaginable. Before we show you the exact moment, Karen made the fatal mistake of mocking Judge Judy's age, and before revealing the devastating text messages that exposed her fraud and destroyed her marriage on national television, hit that subscribe button right now. What you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and prove that karma is not only real, but perfectly timed. Comment below where you're watching from, and smash that like button if you believe that age shaming is never okay, and that fake influencers deserve to be exposed for the frauds they are. This isn't just another courtroom case. This is a masterclass in why you should never disrespect Judge Judy, why text messages can destroy your life in court, and why building your entire existence on Instagram lies will eventually catch up with you in the most public and humiliating way possible. The moment those text messages appear on the courtroom screen, when Karen realizes that her husband, her affair, and her entire fake life are about to be exposed to millions of viewers, is something you will never forget. The case seemed simple enough on the surface, the kind Judge Judy could resolve in minutes before moving on to the next entitled person in need of a reality check. Karen Mitchell was being sued by Jessica Romano for breach of contract and refusal to pay for photography services rendered at a Sweet 16 party. The paperwork showed a signed contract for $3,200, proof of services delivered, and Karen's social media posts using the same photographs she now claimed were worthless. Judge Judy had seen 1,000 cases just like this. Small business owners getting stiffed by clients who thought contracts were suggestions rather than obligations. But what made this case special? What made Judge Judy's eyes narrow with that unmistakable look of predatory focus was the additional evidence submitted during discovery. Text messages between Karen and her husband, bank records revealing financial desperation behind her Instagram facade of wealth, and a pattern showing Karen wasn't just another deadbeat client. She was a calculating fraud who had planned from the start to steal Jessica's work and her payment. Judge Judy opened the proceedings with her trademark no-nonsense tone, her voice cutting through the courtroom with the authority of someone who had presided over more than 20,000 cases and had zero patience for excuses. Miss Mitchell, you're being sued by Miss Romano for $3,200 for photography services you contracted and received but refused to pay for. Tell me why you believe you don't owe this money. It was a simple, straightforward question, one any reasonable person would answer with facts. But Karen Mitchell was not reasonable, and her response would immediately show everyone in the courtroom that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Karen leaned back in her chair with theatrical confidence, flipping her highlighted hair over her shoulder as if she were posing for an Instagram story rather than defending herself in court. Your Honor, I run a very successful lifestyle and mommy blog with over 47,000 Instagram followers, and my brand is built on aesthetic perfection and aspirational content. The photos Miss Romano delivered were completely unusable for my platform. They made my daughter look basic. The lighting was amateur at best, and honestly, I couldn't post 90% of them without damaging my carefully curated feed and losing followers. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised slightly, the first warning sign experienced. Viewers recognized as the calm before the storm. Miss Mitchell, did you or did you not sign a contract agreeing to pay Miss Romano $3,200 for 12 hours of photography coverage at your daughter's party? Karen waved her hand dismissively, as if the concept of a legally binding contract was beneath her. Well, yes, technically I signed something, but that was before I realized she wasn't capable of delivering Instagram-quality content. I have standards, Your Honor. My followers expect a certain level of excellence, and I can't compromise my brand just because I signed a piece of paper. The audience murmured with disapproval, but Karen seemed to interpret their reaction as jealousy rather than disgust. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on that dangerous edge that made attorneys break out in cold sweats. Miss Mitchell, I'm looking at evidence submitted by Miss Romano that shows you posted over 200 of these allegedly unusable photos to your Instagram account within hours of receiving them. You tagged Miss Romano's business, wrote glowing captions about how perfect the photos were, and added heart emojis and 5-star ratings. Would you like to explain that contradiction? Karen's confident facade cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly with the kind of shameless pivoting only truly entitled people can manage without flinching. Well, Your Honor, I posted those initially because I didn't want to be rude, but when I really examined them closely and showed them to other influencers in my network, we all agreed they weren't up to professional standards. I was just being nice at first, but business is business, and I can't pay for subpar work just to spare someone's feelings. Jessica Romano's hands clenched into fists as she listened to Karen rewrite history with casual dishonesty. Judge Judy pulled another document from her file, her expression unreadable but her tone sharp. So you posted them, praised them publicly, used them to generate engagement for your account, and then decided they were worthless only after Miss Romano asked for payment? Karen shrugged with infuriating nonchalance. Like I said, I was being polite initially, but when it came time to actually pay, I realized I couldn't in good conscience reward mediocre work. It would go against everything my brand stands for. Judge Judy's patience was clearly wearing thin. She shifted her line of questioning in a way that made Karen visibly uncomfortable. Miss Mitchell, let's talk about your qualifications to judge professional photography. What exactly makes you an expert in photographic quality? Karen straightened in her seat, clearly believing this was her moment to shine and educate the old judge about the modern digital world. Your Honor, with all due respect, I have 47,000 Instagram followers. I've been building my brand for 3 years. I understand composition, lighting, aesthetic appeal, and what resonates with audiences in the social media space. I think my follower count speaks for itself about my expertise in visual content. Judge Judy nodded slowly, as if considering the explanation, then delivered the question that began Karen's unraveling. So your expertise comes from Instagram followers? That's your professional qualification? Judge Judy asked, her tone deceptively calm. Karen nodded enthusiastically, completely missing the trap being set. Exactly. In today's digital age, social media success is the ultimate credential. Traditional photography education is honestly kind of outdated compared to understanding what actually performs well on Instagram and TikTok. The moment had arrived, the point of no return, where Karen's arrogance would collide with Judge Judy's authority in the most spectacular way imaginable. Judge Judy pulled out Karen's signed contract and began reading the terms aloud, her voice emphasizing every legal obligation Karen had agreed to and then violated. Miss Mitchell, this contract clearly states that you agreed to pay the full amount upon delivery of edited digital photographs within 2 weeks of the event. Miss Romano delivered 512 edited photographs in 10 days. You acknowledged receipt. You used the photographs extensively on your social media platforms. By any legal standard, you owe this payment. There is no clause in this contract about Instagram worthiness or follower approval. You received exactly what you contracted for, and you owe exactly what you agreed to pay. The logic was irrefutable. The law was crystal clear. Any reasonable person would have accepted defeat and paid what they owed. But Karen Mitchell's entitlement ran deeper than reason or law, and what came out of her mouth next would seal her fate and create the most viral courtroom moment in television history. Karen let out an exaggerated sigh, the kind reserved for dealing with customer service representatives she deemed beneath her. Then she spoke the words that would haunt her forever. Look, Your Honor, no offense, but maybe if you were more in touch with modern social media standards instead of being stuck in, like, the 1950s or whenever you grew up, you'd understand why these photos are unusable. You're obviously too old to get how Instagram works or what quality content actually looks like in today's digital landscape. I'm not trying to be rude, but your generation just doesn't understand influencer culture and brand management. The silence that followed Karen's age-shaming insult was absolute. Even the courtroom stenographer paused, unable to believe what she'd just heard. The audience gasped audibly, a collective intake of breath that captured the magnitude of Karen's mistake. Jessica Romano's mouth fell open in disbelief, stunned that anyone could be foolish enough to insult Judge Judy to her face on national television. Even the bailiff, a man who had seen everything in 2 decades of courtroom service, shifted uncomfortably and exchanged glances with the production crew. Karen sat there with a self-satisfied smirk, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just committed professional suicide and lit the fuse on a bomb that would obliterate her entire life. Judge Judy's expression transformed in real time, her face shifting from professional detachment to that legendary death stare that had become her trademark, the look that told anyone with half a brain that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. She leaned forward in her chair, her voice dropping to that dangerously quiet tone that was somehow far more terrifying than shouting. Each word was delivered with surgical precision and barely contained fury. "Excuse me, Miss Mitchell. Would you like to repeat what you just said?" For a brief moment, Karen seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but her arrogance and entitlement were too deeply ingrained for genuine self-awareness to take hold. Instead of backing down, apologizing, or showing even a shred of respect, Karen doubled down on her disrespect with a kind of commitment to self-destruction that would have impressed even the most dedicated kamikaze pilot. "I'm just saying, Your Honor, and I mean this with all due respect, but you're what, 80-some years old? You probably don't even have Instagram. How can you possibly understand the standards and requirements of modern influencer photography when you're from a completely different generation? No offense, but the world has changed a lot since you were practicing law back in the old days, and social media has created entirely new standards for visual content that traditional legal frameworks just don't account for." The audacity was breathtaking. The sheer stupidity of insulting a sitting judge's age and competence while simultaneously trying to justify stealing $3,000 from a struggling single mother was almost impressive in its complete lack of self-awareness. Judge Judy sat perfectly still for 3 long seconds, and anyone who had watched her show for more than 5 minutes knew that this pause was not hesitation, but the calm before an absolutely devastating storm. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of 25 years on the family court bench, thousands of cases, and a lifetime of dealing with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else in the room. "Miss Mitchell, I am 78 years old. I have been practicing law since 1965, which means I've been an attorney for longer than you've been alive. I presided over more than 20,000 cases as a family court judge in Manhattan before my television career. I have forgotten more about contract law, evidence, and human behavior than you will ever pretend to know. But thank you for that fascinating assessment of my competence based on my age. It's been very illuminating. Karen's face showed the first flicker of genuine concern, a slight paling of her carefully contoured cheeks as she began to realize that perhaps mocking a federal judge's intelligence had not been her wisest strategic move. But Judge Judy was just getting started, and the systematic destruction of Karen Mitchell's credibility was about to begin in earnest. Miss Mitchell, let's talk about your 47,000 Instagram followers and your expertise in social media, shall we? Judge Judy opened a thick folder that had been sitting on her bench. Karen's eyes widened slightly as she recognized that this was not just a standard case file. This was research, investigation, evidence compiled specifically about her life, her lies, and her fraudulent existence. According to the analysis conducted by my research team, approximately 35,000 of your 47,000 Instagram followers were purchased from bot farms and fake account generators. Your engagement rate is 0.3%, which any actual social media expert would tell you indicates fraudulent follower inflation. Your most popular post in the last 6 months received exactly 142 genuine interactions, and 60% of those came from accounts that also appeared to be purchased bots. The color drained completely from Karen's face as Judge Judy continued her methodical dismantling of every lie Karen had built her identity upon. Furthermore, Miss Mitchell, your so-called successful lifestyle and mommy blog generates approximately $200 per month in actual revenue, mostly from affiliate links that your fake followers never click on. You are not a successful influencer. You are not a brand. You are a fraud who bought fake followers to create an illusion of success. And now you're using that manufactured illusion to justify stealing from a real working photographer who actually earned her skills and reputation through talent and hard work, rather than credit card purchases and bot farms. Karen tried to speak, her voice emerging as a strangled whisper of protest. Your Honor, that's private information. You can't just investigate my social media accounts and my finances without my permission. That's an invasion of privacy and has nothing to do with this case. Judge Judy's smile was absolutely predatory as she delivered her response. When you come into my courtroom, mock my age, question my competence, and attempt to justify fraud by claiming expertise you don't possess. I do my homework, Miss Mitchell. Everything I just described is publicly available information for anyone with basic internet research skills and the motivation to look beyond your carefully filtered Instagram facade. And it has everything to do with this case because it establishes that you are a habitual liar who has built an entire fake existence on social media fraud. But here's what's really interesting about your financial situation, Miss Mitchell, and this is where we get to the heart of why you really refuse to pay Miss Romano. Judge Judy pulled out another set of documents, bank statements and credit card bills that told a story of financial desperation hidden behind designer handbags and Instagram posts at expensive restaurants. Your checking account currently has $842 in it. Your savings account has been empty for 6 months. You have over $60,000 in credit card debt spread across 7 different cards, most of it for maintaining the appearance of wealth for your social media content. You lease your luxury car, you rent your apartment, and you finance every designer item you own on credit, cards that you're currently 3 months behind on paying. The courtroom was absolutely silent as Judge Judy continued her devastating expose of Karen's fraudulent lifestyle. You don't have money to pay Miss Romano because you've spent years living beyond your means to maintain an Instagram illusion of success while drowning in debt. But that's still not the most interesting part of this case, Miss Mitchell. The most interesting part is what my investigators discovered when they subpoenaed your phone records as part of the evidence discovery process. Karen's entire body went rigid, her hands gripping the edge of the defendant's table so hard that her knuckles turned white. Judge Judy held up a phone, Karen's phone, which had been submitted as evidence and analyzed by the court. These text messages between you and your husband, David Mitchell, exchanged during your daughter's Sweet 16 party while Miss Romano was working, tell a very different story about why you refused payment. A story about fraud, conspiracy, and premeditated theft that goes far beyond a simple contract dispute. Karen Mitchell's world began crumbling in real time as Judge Judy held up the phone like a prosecutor presenting a murder weapon to a jury. The confidence that had carried her through years of scamming small business owners and manipulating service workers evaporated instantly, replaced by raw panic visible in every muscle of her face. Your Honor, those are private marital communications between me and my husband, she stammered, her voice rising in pitch with desperation. You can't just read our personal text messages in open court. That's a violation of privacy laws and has nothing to do with a photography contract dispute. Judge Judy's response was swift and merciless, delivered with the kind of legal precision that reminded everyone watching why she had been one of Manhattan's most respected family court judges for a quarter century. Miss Mitchell, these text messages were legally subpoenaed as part of the discovery process in this case. Your lawyer had every opportunity to object during pretrial proceedings and chose not to, which means they're now admissible evidence, and they have everything to do with this case because they establish premeditation, intent to commit fraud, and a conspiracy between you and your husband to deliberately steal Miss Romano's services and payment, Judge. Judy looked directly at Karen with an expression that combined disappointment and disgust in equal measure. Miss Mitchell, is your husband David in the courtroom today? The camera panned to the back row where a middle-aged man in a business suit sat, looking like he desperately wished he could dissolve into the floor and disappear. David Mitchell's face was ashen, his eyes darting between his wife and the exits as he realized that whatever was about to be revealed would destroy more than just this court case. Karen's voice came out as barely a whisper. Yes, he's here, but I don't understand why that matters or what this has to do with anything. Judge Judy's smile held no warmth, only the satisfaction of someone who had cornered a liar with irrefutable evidence. Oh, I think you understand perfectly, Miss Mitchell. I think you know exactly what I'm about to show this courtroom. And I think you've been dreading this moment since you received notice that your phone records were subpoenaed. Judge Judy began reading the text messages aloud, her voice steady and clear, ensuring every word was captured by the courtroom microphones and heard by millions of viewers who would share this moment across every social media platform imaginable. These messages were exchanged between Karen Mitchell and David Mitchell on the evening of the Sweet 16 party while Miss Romano was actively working and photographing the event. The first message, sent by David Mitchell at 9:47 p.m., read, "Is the photographer still there? We need to talk about Marcus." Judge Judy paused, letting that name hang in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Karen's response, sent at 9:52 p.m., read, "Yes, she's everywhere. Can't talk now. Marcus is getting impatient about the condo." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the audience began processing what these messages implied. Judge Judy raised her hand for silence and continued reading. David's next response, sent at 9:55 p.m., would make the implications even clearer. "Tell your boyfriend to wait. We close on the condo next week. Then you can leave and I keep the house." The gasps from the audience were audible, and Jessica Romano's eyes went wide with shock as she realized this case was about to reveal far more than a simple contract dispute. Karen Mitchell's face had gone from pale to ghostly white, and she seemed unable to form words as Judge Judy continued her methodical dismantling. "So, let me understand this correctly. Miss Mitchell, while Miss Romano was working your daughter's party, capturing memories of what should have been a special family moment, you and your husband were texting about your boyfriend Marcus and your plans to divorce. You were discussing real estate transactions and custody arrangements while pretending to be a happy family for Instagram photos." Karen tried to speak, but only produced incoherent sounds of protest. Judge Judy was not finished. "Not even close. Oh, there's much more context here, Miss Mitchell. Much more. The next series of text messages reveals exactly why you refused to pay Miss Romano and exposes the premeditated fraud that brought us here today." Judge Judy's voice took on an even harder
edge as she read the next exchange aloud. Karen.
Mitchell to David Mitchell at 10:15 p.m. "We're already over budget for this party, so we can't pay the photographer full amount." David's response at 10:18 p.m. "Just refuse payment. Claim she did bad work. We need that $3,200 for your condo deposit with Marcus." Karen's reply at 10:21 p.m. "Good idea. I'll post the photos first so she can't claim I didn't use them, then refuse to pay." Finally, David's message at 10:23 p.m. "Perfect. She's just some struggling photographer. She won't have money to sue." The courtroom exploded into chaos as the full scope of Karen and David's conspiracy became clear. They had planned from the very beginning to steal Jessica's work and payment, discussing their fraud in real time while Jessica worked 12 exhausting hours to capture their daughter's party. Jessica Romano burst into tears vindication and rage mixing together as she finally understood that she hadn't done anything wrong, that the photos had never been the problem, and that she had been targeted and victimized by two calculating fraudsters who had conspired to steal her livelihood to fund an extramarital affair and a secret real estate transaction. Judge Judy allowed the courtroom noise to continue for several seconds before gaveling for order. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute moral authority. "This is premeditated fraud, Miss Mitchell. You didn't refuse payment because of photo quality. You refused payment because you and your husband conspired to steal that money to fund your affair and your divorce plans. You posted the photos to your Instagram. You praised them publicly. You generated engagement and content for your fake influencer brand. And then you deliberately refused payment as part of a calculated scheme that you and your husband planned via text message while Miss Romano was still working in your home." Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate pleading whine that bore no resemblance to her earlier arrogance. "Your Honor, please. This is a private matter between me and my husband. It has nothing to do with the photography contract. We were just having marital problems and making poor decisions, but that doesn't mean I committed fraud." Judge Judy's laugh was cold and utterly devoid of humor. "Poor decisions. You plan to steal $3,200 from a single mother to fund your boyfriend's condo deposit. That's not a poor decision, Miss Mitchell. That's a crime." Judge Judy was far from finished with her systematic destruction of Karen Mitchell's lies. The next set of text messages would reveal that the fraud and conspiracy went even deeper than anyone in that courtroom had imagined. But before we get to those messages, Miss Mitchell, I want to address something you said earlier about my age and my inability to understand modern social media culture. Judge Judy's voice dripped with contempt as she held up her own phone, showing it to the courtroom cameras. "I do have Instagram, Miss Mitchell. I have 2.3 million real verified organic followers who will be very interested in watching this episode when it airs. My engagement rate is 12%, which any actual social media expert would tell you is exceptionally high and indicates a genuinely engaged audience. Unlike your purchased bots and fake followers, my audience actually exists and actually cares about content. So perhaps before you mock someone's age and technological competence, you should make sure you're not a complete fraud whose entire digital existence is built on lies and credit card purchases." The humiliation on Karen's face was absolute and devastating. But Judge Judy had not yet delivered the final blow that would completely shatter whatever remained of Karen's carefully constructed facade. "There are more text messages, Miss Mitchell, and these ones reveal that your marriage isn't just ending. It's been a complete sham for quite some time." Judge Judy read the next exchange with clinical detachment. David Mitchell to Karen Mitchell at 11:03 p.m. "Once the photographer is gone, remind me we need to talk about custody. You get Amanda on weekends. I keep primary custody. Deal." Karen's response at 11:07 p.m. "Fine, as long as Marcus and I get the condo. You can have your little secretary at the house." David's final message of the evening at 11:12 p.m. "She's not my secretary anymore. She's my fiancée now. Stop being bitter about it." The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the full picture emerged. Karen and David Mitchell were both having affairs, both planning their divorce, both using their daughter's Sweet 16 party as cover, while texting their affair partners and negotiating custody and asset division. And in the middle of their collapsing marriage and mutual betrayal, they had found time to conspire together to defraud Jessica Romano of her payment, to fund their separate romantic escapes. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, surveying Karen with the kind of disgusted fascination normally reserved for particularly interesting specimens of toxic waste. "So, Miss Mitchell, you're not just a fraud and a thief. You and your husband are conducting a fake marriage while both carrying on affairs, using your daughter's milestone celebration as an opportunity to text your respective lovers, and finding common ground only in your conspiracy to steal from the woman you hired to document this travesty of family values. And you had the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall, to come into my courtroom and mock my age while lecturing me about standards and professionalism." Karen tried one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her exposure. "Your Honor, my personal life, my marriage problems, they don't change the fact that I had legitimate concerns about the photo quality, and you can't just ignore my complaints because you don't like my relationship choices." Judge Judy's response was immediate and brutal. "Your complaints about photo quality were fabricated lies created to justify theft. You posted over 200 of Miss Romano's photos within hours of receiving them. You praised them publicly. You used them to generate content and engagement for your fraudulent influencer account. The only thing illegitimate here is you, your fake followers, your fake marriage, and your completely transparent attempt to steal from a woman who trusted you with a signed contract. The verdict came swift and devastating, delivered with the finality of a guillotine blade. Miss Mitchell, you are a liar, a fraud, and a thief who conspired with your husband to deliberately steal payment from Miss Romano, while she worked in good faith to provide services you contracted and received. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $3,200 for the original contract, plus $2,000 in court costs, plus an additional $3,000 in punitive damages for fraud, emotional distress, and the sheer audacity of your premeditated conspiracy to commit theft. Total judgment, $8,200, payable immediately. Furthermore, I am recommending that these text messages and this case file be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for review of possible criminal fraud charges. Your fake influencer career is over. Your credibility is destroyed, and your marriage was apparently already dead before you walked into my courtroom. So at least you can't blame me for that disaster. Karen Mitchell collapsed into her chair as if all the bones had been removed from her body, her designer handbag falling to the floor as she buried her face in her hands and began sobbing uncontrollably. The transformation from smug, arrogant influencer to completely destroyed woman took less than 30 seconds, and the cameras captured every moment of her breakdown. Judge Judy delivered her final statement with cold satisfaction. And Miss Mitchell, one more thing. For the record, I may be 78 years old, but I still have enough mental capacity to recognize a fraud when I see one, to read text messages that prove conspiracy and intent, and to deliver justice to people who think their age, their follower count, or their fake Instagram lifestyle makes them untouchable. Age brings experience, wisdom, and the ability to see through people like you in about 30 seconds. Perhaps you'll remember that the next time you consider mocking someone for being older than you. Case dismissed. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel came down with absolute finality, and Karen was escorted out of the courtroom, still sobbing, her mascara running in dark streams down her face, her carefully curated image destroyed as thoroughly as her fraudulent marriage and fake influencer career. David Mitchell had already disappeared from the courtroom, apparently deciding that avoiding cameras was more important than supporting his soon-to-be ex-wife through her public humiliation. Jessica Romano sat in stunned relief, tears of vindication streaming down her face as she realized she would finally be paid and that the woman who had tried to destroy her business and her life had been exposed as a complete fraud on national television. The aftermath was swift and merciless in its totality. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, Karen's Instagram account was flooded with thousands of comments calling her a fraud and a thief, before she finally deleted it entirely. Her mommy blog was taken down within 24 hours. David Mitchell filed for divorce 3 days later, citing irreconcilable differences and attaching the courtroom text messages as evidence of infidelity and fraud. Marcus, the mysterious boyfriend who had been so impatient about his condo, apparently vanished from Karen's life the moment she could no longer afford to fund his real estate dreams. The video of Karen mocking Judge Judy's age, followed by the devastating text message revelation, went viral across every social media platform imaginable, accumulating over 50 million views in the first week alone. TikTok users created reaction videos. Twitter exploded with hashtags like Karen got judged, respect your elders, and text messages never lie. Legal experts use the case as a teaching example of how digital evidence can destroy fraudulent claims in court. Social media analysts dissected Karen's fake follower fraud as a cautionary tale about influencer culture. Relationship counselors discussed the toxic dynamic of Karen and David's conspiracy as an example of how marriages can become partnerships in crime rather than love. Jessica Romano's photography business exploded with supportive bookings from people who had seen the episode and wanted to back a small business owner who had stood up to fraud. She was featured on local news programs, interviewed on podcasts about small business rights, and became an advocate for other photographers and service providers victimized by clients who refused payment. She started a foundation to provide legal support for small business owners fighting contract fraud, using her settlement money from Karen to help others who couldn't afford to sue. Karen Mitchell's life was comprehensively destroyed by her own arrogance, her text messages, and her fatal decision to mock Judge Judy's age on national television. She lost her Instagram career, her marriage, her boyfriend, her credibility, and $8,200 she didn't have. She became permanently infamous as the woman who thought she was too smart for consequences, who believed her fake followers made her an expert, and who learned the hardest way possible that text, messages are forever and respect matters, more than engagement rates. If you believe Karen, Mitchell got exactly what she deserved for mocking Judge Judy's age and conspiring to commit fraud. Smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss more cases where entitled people learn that actions have consequences, and that Judge Judy doesn't care about your follower count, your age, or your excuses. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that respect costs nothing but means everything, and that text messages can absolutely destroy your life when you use them to plan crimes. Hit that notification bell because next time we have an even more shocking case where Karen tries to sue her neighbor for having a Ring doorbell, and Judge Judy shows footage that proves she's been lying for months. You won't want to miss what happens when technology exposes another entitled fraud who thought she was untouchable. Remember, in Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, age brings wisdom, evidence always wins, and fake influencers always get exposed eventually. Justice isn't just served, it's delivered with receipts. Karen Mitchell learned that lesson in the most public and humiliating way imaginable.